Welcome back to the David Kurten Show on today's News Talk TNT. I am absolutely delighted to have with me on the show today Godfrey Bloom. Welcome to the show, Godfrey.
Well, thank you for inviting me, David. A pleasure to be here.
Really good to have you on the show. I know you've been on TNT before, but this is the first time you've been on my show. And I've followed you for so long. You've been an MEP. You're very active on social media, and everything you say makes absolute common sense. I think, if people listen to what you say, they would have a great picture of what's going wrong in this country and the West, and what we need to do to fix things as well. But you are obviously being an MEP. What do you make of the state of politics at the moment in the UK?
Well, it's a bit like North America, isn't it? We don't have a choice. We've either got Sunak, who was dumped on us out of the blue. Nobody'd ever heard of him before. And he was maneuvered into position, as most of these ex-Goldman Sachs people are. And of course, we've got Starmer, who, is another very shady World Economic Forum customer. We don't have a choice. And of course, we've heard from Reform, who are quite clearly fake. And the more we hear of them, the more fake it is. So I'm afraid we are disenfranchised. And I think that's a tragedy.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same as well. I mean, I've started the Heritage Party, which I hope will be what was just basically what everyone thought was common sense 30 or 40 years ago. But, we're still relatively small as a challenger party. But I think, there's a very interesting point you make about reform, because as time goes on and on, they're starting to shoot themselves in the foot with deselecting candidates for using their free speech and saying things about the current situation in Israel and Gaza, which I think is quite wrong. I mean, what do you think about that whole situation and what our response should be to what's happening in the Middle East?
Well, I think people are entitled to speak out. I haven't taken a great deal of interest in the Palestine situation over the years because I've been too much worried about trying to get our own freedom in our own country. So my priority is there. However, there is one thing that I believe that we can all stand firm on, regardless, and that is genocide is wrong. And I can't see how we've had people go out to Israel and A, pretend it's not happening, and B, pretend if it is happening, it's all right. So I'm afraid I'm disgusted, frankly, leaving aside the politics of the whole situation, Israel-Palestine. Zionism seems to have run its flag up the mast. And I can tell you that some of my Jewish friends are equally disgusted. This isn't, about Judaism or anti-Semite or anything that they are horrified too. And a lot of them are speaking out, both in North America. And I think the other day at the Oxford Union, I think I saw somebody, a Jewish guy, making it quite clear. If you cannot, as a parliamentary candidate, bring this into the frame, and you can't, of course, if you're Conservative or Labour, and now Reform have gone the same way. What is the point of calling your party Reform when it's conform? They're no different. And I said at the beginning, we saw that dreadful picture of Tice in the Ukraine. So he has nothing to add to that discussion at all, it would seem. When there was a by-election going on, which Reform was actually standing in, he was a big supporter of the jab. And I think he wanted it to be mandatory. His track record is abysmal. I was in politics for 10 years, David. I know a charlatan when I see one.
Right, that's I would totally agree with you on so much of that. I don't mention them too much, but I think everyone can see what they stand for now, and people are starting to call them conform, exactly as you say, because they've been on the wrong side of everything over the last 4 years. No jab, no job, more money to Ukraine. I mean, I was on the Piers Morgan show, and Richard Tice was on one side, Piers Morgan was on the other, and they did a pincer attack on me to try to make me look bad because I was calling for an end to giving money to Ukraine and we should try to de-escalate. But they both were trying to have a go at me. It didn't work, but you can see that now also. But I'm the same as you. I mean, I never commented much on the Middle East, deliberately so. Because I'm more interested in this country. But since the 7th of October, everybody knows what I want to think. So I can't get away from it. But what's happening in this country is very disturbing in terms of how much money we're spending. I mean, we're getting ourselves into a mountain of debt, a massive hole. And, do you think we're ever going to get out of this massive national debt that we've got ourselves into?
Well, no, because it's impossible. The national debt, you could argue about how it's actually constructed, but as a professional economist for many years, an investment manager, I would argue that the true national debt of this country is around about £2.5 trillion. And that errs on the side of conservatism. So what the problem we have is we will not cut public spending. We must cut public spending. It's the same in North America and it's the same everywhere else in Western Europe. We have never yet had an election where a party has actually stood on cutting expenditure. And if you don't cut expenditure and you continue to borrow and you continue to print money, the only answer that you will get back from that, of course, is inflation. And we have inflation. And don't believe the numbers that the government are trying to sell us like it's 3% or 3.5%. If you go back to RPI and not CPI, which is the latest way of fiddling the figures, it's 5.5%. And of course, the year before, it was probably nearer 13%. So in the last 2 years, we've probably seen inflation running at 2%. And that's what inflation of money, because inflation is the product of money supply. Increase the money supply, and you get inflation. And we haven't seen anything yet. We're going to have hyperinflation coming down the road because nobody's actually attending to the problem. It's the same with the United States. So no good is going to come of this at all. And who suffers from inflation all the time, always have done? The ordinary Joe, the man on the Clapham omnibus, the really rich. Inflation just means asset price inflation. So if you're sitting on assets, they just get inflated and it protects you. But if you're the guy that trying to feed your family, do an honest day's work, they're the guys. They're the guys that are going to be punished by this, and they're already being paycheck to paycheck in this country, and of course North America now paycheck to paycheck there. This is no way to run an economy. They're all madmen. They're madmen. But then, of course, if you lift the cover a little bit, I would argue that they are determined to destroy the economy, mass immigration, destroy our culture, and it's all part of the World Economic Forum. And when people say, oh, Godfrey, you're a conspiracy theorist, it's absurd. Clock into their website. They are saying this is exactly what is going to transpire. I have to give the World Economic Forum credit for something, and that's being honest. They are quite honest about it. 15-minute cities and the getting rid of borders and the nation state, and we'll all have nothing and we'll be happy. Well, we'll all have nothing, that is for sure, but we won't be happy. But I can tell you who won't have nothing, and that would be the World Economic Forum agents, which includes the King, the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and the bloody Archbishop of Canterbury. They'll be all right. They're not going to suffer from any of this. If you're an ordinary working Joe, not in the public sector, who of course is another sector which is heavily protected by index linking in their pensions and everything else, if you're an ordinary working guy, you're toast at the moment, and it's a disgrace.
These World Economic Forum people, I think they're absolutely wicked. I mean, I don't know what you'd call what they want to implement, whether it's, communism or fascism or totalitarianism or technocracy, or maybe it's a combination of all three. But I mean, it wouldn't even cross my mind to try to do this, but they're on some completely different wavelength where they almost seem to, as you say, want to destroy the nation, the economy, get rid of any, way that people can be independent, so that we're all slaves to a system. But if we become slaves to a system like this, I very much doubt that they want to give anyone anything, even a morsel or scrap of food.
Well, of course, you're quite right, David. And here's the problem, which it doesn't go debated as it should do, because we no longer have a free press. The BBC, of course, is just a mouthpiece for the state and WEF. So all these people basically piss in the same pot. Now, this is just not good enough. If we had a free press, they could expose this, and they're just not doing it. And people should know, because most people still remain ignorant. 80% of the population. I spoke to a major Yorkshire landowner last year, a very nice man, old school. And he said, "Oh, who should we vote for? What do you think's going on and all this stuff?" I said, it doesn't make any difference at all, because everybody is World Economic Forum. And his response was, just remind me again who they are, Godfrey. This is one of the major landowners in North Yorkshire. And this is what we're dealing with. The man on the Clapham omnibus doesn't get it. Landowners don't get it. The Blue Rinse Tory brigade don't get it, although they're dying and they're withering on the vine. So this is really quite a scandalous situation we're in. And of course, they are all Malthusians. They actually are totally up front. The King is up front. Klaus Schwab is up front. Bill Gates is up front. The Duke of Edinburgh is up front. There are too many people on the planet, and they want fewer, by not just a few, but billions and billions fewer. Of course, David, they don't mean them. They don't mean them. They mean us. So the royal family doesn't stop breeding. We're the ones that we stop breeding. We're not allowed to go on holidays. They swan around in private jets and all the rest of it. David Attenborough's carbon footprint must be the biggest in the world. He goes everywhere all the time. One of the great frauds of our country, St. David of Attenborough. And of course, this climate hoax goes on and on and on, that man-made global warming is somehow going to boil the planet. Total nonsense. And of course, there are Nobel Prize winners, physics prize winners, and top international geologists who say it's nonsense. They're just not allowed on the telly. It's easy to get a celebrity or a royal on to say we're all going to die. But why won't they get somebody who actually knows what they're talking about? And this is the problem. I was on the Environmental Committee in the European Union for about 3 years before I moved to the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee. And I actually threw out a challenge to every researcher in the Parliament, as you know, of whom there were, I don't know, probably 15,000 researchers. And I said, somebody tell me the correlation between man-made or carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and global warming, with the exception, of course, that the increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, you see some global warming after that. So there's a correlation, but it's not the cause. It's not the cause. The warming comes after, not before. So this is something that nobody seems to want to debate. There has been no dissent on climate change for years and years. There's no dissent on public spending, and there's no dissent allowed publicly on mass immigration. And until that happens, we're just going to, well, I think it's already going down the lavatory, to be frank. I don't know quite what we can do, whether North America can do and what we can do and what Western Europe can do. You might argue that it's already too late.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm trying. I've as you know, I've set up the Heritage Party, and I agree with all of those things. Do you think I have a chance? Do you think there is any possibility of actually turning this around? Just quickly before we go to the end of the show.
Well, the thing is with UKIP, it was a one-trick pony. It didn't start that way. It started as libertarian and no regulation, but it was hijacked. The UKIP was hijacked. But we did have at least one thing was leave the European Union. We must leave the European Union. It's much easier to go to the electorate, David, with a one-liner. And anybody who's got a bit of, this is where reform fall down, is to say, we will mobilize the Royal Navy and the Royal Navy will stop immigration by towing the boats back. That would get them elected. But
Yes.
that's going to upset hope, not hate, isn't it? That's going to upset all the sorts of weirdos who are their masters. So the whole thing's bullshit, isn't it, really?
Well, with them, it certainly is. I mean, that is our policy. We got to get the Royal Navy, instead of escorting the boats to Dover
Yeah.
from the middle of the channel, get a grappling hook and pull them back to France and leave them there. And then, put a big knife in their boat, not the people, by the way, the boat, so they can't clamber back on it. It makes common sense.
We kept Philip of Spain out. We kept the Kaiser out. We kept Hitler out. I'm really sure we can keep these paddle boats out if somebody puts their mind to it.
Well, they should be able to, shouldn't they? It boggles the mind. It's absolutely ridiculous. All of these things coming at us, which are just so crazy, and all we need to get back to is just complete common sense, like you say. Turn back the boats, get public spending under control, stop wasting money on quangos and subsidies for stuff that doesn't work, like wind turbines and solar panels and battery systems and electric cars, and actually produce some energy cheaply and reliably, and bring manufacturing back so we can get the economy going again, and provide jobs for people so they can look after themselves and stand on their own 2 feet. It's very simple. Like, Godfrey, it's so simple. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. Hope you'll come back on again. Thanks so much.
I will indeed.
Great. This is today's News Talk, TNT.